Hey, I'm Shaye Warner, and you are listening to the Casual Cattle Conversations podcast. Whether you are a seasoned rancher or just curious about the cattle world, this podcast dives into the stories, science, and strategies shaping the future of ranching. Let's get started and keep your herd ahead of the herd. Folks, today we are visiting with Doug Ferguson, also known as Mr. CattleMaster, and the topic of today is how to profitably sell, buy, and manage stocker cattle. So Doug looks at things from a sell-buy marketing approach. You may remember that from when he was previously a guest on the show. And he has a lot of experience adding monetary value to different groups of cattle. So with that, we are going to visit from Doug. Now, whether you are a rancher or someone interested in buying stockers, there is a lot of great information to keep in mind about your own decisions. So let's get to the conversation. Good records make ranching easier, whether you have a few head or hundreds, or even thousands. For over 25 years, CattleMaster has brought herd and ranch records together in one place, so you can stay organized and make informed decisions with confidence. It's the most trusted and widely used cattle software in North America, supported by a team of ranchers who use it in their own herds. You can start with a free 21-day trial or check out a free online demo to see how it works. Learn more at cattlemax.com/start. Well, Doug, it is a pleasure to have you back on the podcast. The last time you were on, that episode turned into an absolute fan favorite where we talked more about sell-by marketing and specifically on the female side. So I'm excited to visit with you today and hear your thoughts about stocker and yearling management. So thanks for joining.
Yeah, it's good to see you again, Shaye. Stockers, I love stockers. Let's do this.
Okay. So before we dive into what sounds like one of your favorite topics, tell the listeners why you bet on the beef industry.
We're going to start off with me making you roll your eyes. I split hairs over words a lot, and you said bet. And, that sounds a lot like gambling, a little risky. I would use the word invest because there's an expected return. You go back to when I was a kid, and I'm sure your upbringing was the same way. Everybody around you, you got to go to school, get a job, degree, stuff like that. Cattle are something you do on evenings and weekends. And that's where I kind of come in as a teenager with a bad attitude, like BS. You got this $80 billion a year industry, which is probably more today with cattle prices being where they are, and you're telling me everybody's doing this for giggles. There has to be a way to make money. And that's what kind of led me to the sell-buy. And really the other thing is I love cattle. I mean, I'd much rather be around cattle than humans. Like, I'm sure a lot of people that raise cattle feel the same way.
Because you do approach these conversations with that sell-by marketing mindset, can you briefly remind listeners what that sell-by marketing mindset and strategy is, just so they're aware as we go through today's conversation?
Sure. So sell-buy is the marketing method a lot of the old timers talk about, where you capture your profit on the buy. So the there's two definitions. The short definition is it's a real-time cash flow reckoning. So we see those relationships as they exist in the present. So there isn't going to be any of this projected break-evens or none of that. We're dealing with real-time, real numbers.
Now, you said that stockers are one of your favorite groups of cattle or classes of cattle to run. Why do you appreciate stockers so much?
The turnover can be real rapid with the stockers. There's so many different ways that you can profit from stockers, and I feel like they offer more exit routes. For example, you buy a 3-weight, you could sell him weighing 5, you could take him to where he weighs 8, you could finish him all the way out. Most of the time the value of gain is good, and so it's a weight gain business. There are other times, if that value of gain is really small, there are other things we can do to add value to these cattle and still capture a profit margin.
So you mentioned a few of those different routes that you can take to profit off of stockers. What are you considering to when you decide, are you going to sell them at 5, 8, or finish them? What are some considerations that you go through to decide which route you'll take?
So the very first thing, and I start all my marketing schools with this now, is you do not sell an animal unless you already have the replacement animal identified. So like if I have this 8 weight in inventory, for example, and 4 weights are undervalued to that 8 weight, see, I've already identified that buyback. I can sell these 8 weights, buy these 4s. It's going to be a prosperous trade.
Now, when you are looking at a load of stockers, what are you looking for in that group of cattle specifically to make sure it's going to be a profitable enterprise for you?
To sum it up in one word, value. And that could mean a lot of different things. It could just be the weight gain. So I got to date this, first week October. We just got a lot of rain here. Ball and calves are coming to town with a 50, 70 cent discount because of the weather swing. Before the weather swing, the discount wasn't, that dramatic. So right there, just weaning them, good and a good hard wean. I'm talking, 45, 60 days. In some parts of the country, take Kentucky, always a real easy example. If you look at their weighted averages, they will have footnotes on there that say value added. That could be load lot, that could be a wean and a vac. There's so many other things, feeder bulls. And, in some parts of the country, you're not going to see very many feeder bulls because that gets taken care of at branding time. So if you have feeder bulls, you're a lousy rancher. Other parts of the country, you see a lot of feeder bulls. And this is kind of lost on me, but for some reason, there's a lot of people just don't know how to castrate that animal, And if you're one of the few that knows how to handle it, there's a good discount there. So when you castrate that animal, turn him into a steer, that's what the house flippers would call forced equity. So picking up on some of those things right there, just like that, buying the small packages, getting them all started, then resorting into load lots is another one. There's so many different ways we could do this.
Do you put emphasis on, say, the specific vaccine protocols or anything genetic? Is there anything specific you're looking at there?
No, and I'm going to make your cow-calf guys cringe when I say this, but you've never seen a buyer with the winning bid say, hey, those got genetics to burn, we'll throw an extra dime on top of that winning bid. So genetics really don't factor in for me. And vaccine protocol, this is the nice thing about fall run is some of these calves are coming to town and they announce they've had these shots on this date. And, some of them are given what I call good shots. You have to be familiar with vaccine programs. I'm a big fan of using modified live. And so if you announce that you used a killed vaccine, I'm like, well, that was sterile water. There was really no point in giving that shot. So understand what it is that your customer wants. It's not so much what you want, it's what your customer wants, because that's who's going to sign their name to the front of the check when you sell your cattle.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie, at that genetic comment, it did make me cringe a little bit as a seed stock supplier.
As a buyer, I'm sitting there a few rows up from ringside, and they run the cattle in, they announce whose they are, what they've had done, they weigh them, and that outgate opens. My first job is to be an appraiser. So I'm looking at body conformation. Are they trying to sneak a swollen joint past me? Do they have active pink eye? I mean, I've only got just a handful of seconds to make that judgment. And so nowhere in there does genetics factor in. Now, there's a local seed stock producer, and if I'm buying calves to go to grass in the summer and they say they're out of such and such bulls, I'm out, because I know those cattle are not going to gain on grass. Now, if I'm buying them to go to the background in pens, I'm in all day, just because I know that seed stock producer feeds these cows, the calves are born, he hooks the umbilical cord up to the creep feeder. That's what they're bred for.
I still want to kind of stay on this topic a little bit more about what you're looking for in the set of stockers? I mean, you talked about the appraisal side a little bit. You're looking at confirmation. Is there anything limping in there that they're trying to sneak past you? Is there anything else that goes into that appraisal process for you?
I kind of mentioned like the feeder bulls. Do they have horns? Physical blemishes. There's another class of cattle I used to buy a lot, and with the demands on my time with my daughter's basketball schedule and marketing schools, we'll see a lot of restart cattle. And what those are those are cattle that somebody tried to wean, weaning went bad, and so they're just trying to dump them before it gets worse. If a guy knows how to handle those kind of cattle, them can be a great buy. And get those straightened out, get them on the train track, and it takes a little longer to get those cattle started, but there's some good money to be made there. Also, as a buyer, reputation. You hear auctioneers talk about reputation cattle. Do you have a good sale barn reputation or a poor one? Give you an example. There's a really fancy set of black cattle in this county, and I've bought them twice. That was one time too many. They come to my place and they just get sick. Death loss was a little high on them. And they're fancy. They'll be weaned, triple vaccinated. What I come to find out was they were weaning them on medicated feed. And then my backgrounding yard turned into rehab. So I'm not going to buy those cattle anymore. There are other cattle that I know. I've bought them in the past. They're neighbors. And if they don't die at that guy's place, they darn sure aren't going to die at mine. And so all these things kind of factor in.
Hey folks, can I steal your attention away for less than a minute? Ranching is a business, and profitable ones don't happen by accident. If you're ready to run your operation with clarity, confidence, and a strategic plan, my new course, Profit Foundations for Ranchers, is built for you. You'll learn how to define measurable success for your ranch, identify where profit is slipping through the cracks, and put systems in place that help you make better decisions faster. This isn't the theory, it's a practical, ranch-tested business training designed to improve your bottom line. It's the same strategies I use on our own operation. Visit casualcattleconversations.com to learn more, and the direct link is in the show notes. All right, let's get back to the episode. So if someone is new to buying stockers, how would you encourage them to gain an idea of these reputations of, say, ranchers or other producers who are putting cattle through the sale barn?
The first thing I'd probably say is to understand the math, understand what value of gain is, because value of gain only tells us two things. Will it pay me to put weight on these cattle? And what cattle can I add the most value to the quickest? That'd be a good place to start. The other thing I'd say, and this comes from almost 30 years experience sitting in sale barns, but if those seasoned buyers show no interest in a group of cattle, that's a red flag.
So are you only buying cattle through a barn, or will you buy anything privately from neighbors or people who have a good reputation with you?
So that's going to probably be more of a local question. I live in farmer country here in southeast Nebraska, so a lot of these herds are small. I'm not going to waste my time going to somebody's place trying to do a private treaty deal. And the simple reason is the conversation goes like this. Oh, I got these calves for sale. Come by, take a look at them. Well, how big do you think they are? And they give me a weight. I get there, and I think they missed the weight by 150 pounds, maybe more. Then I ask them what they want, and, they want the market topping price. They lose their mind over a pencil shrink, and then they want just as much for their heifers as they want for their steers. It's just not worth my time to try that. Now, you go to other places, and there's been people that have come through my marketing schools. They do very well buying cattle off somebody else's farm.
What do you think makes the difference there? Is it just the relationship in general? Are there other factors?
I think it's more of a cultural deal. You get into ranch country, and those people are raising cattle specifically. I mean, that's what they're doing. They're raising cattle for a living. Where I'm at, guy has 40 cows, he's raising, corn and soybeans. The cattle are more of an afterthought, and so I don't think they understand the business side as well.
Now, Doug, when you buy these cattle and get them onto your place, what management steps are you taking? Are you doing anything on the health protocol side, the nutrition side, that's specifically, standard for how you operate that you found to be successful?
I use the word trade because by definition, that's what we're doing. We're selling these cattle, we're buying these. I'm not talking about running swappers. Buy them in this barn on Monday, sell them somewhere else on Thursday. I'm talking about running a legit program. And, being a stocker operator, I know that other stocker operators or feed yards are my customers. So my reputation is built on that health program. So the way I see it, my job is to buy these high-risk cattle, straighten them out, and when I resell them to that feed yard, they should be bulletproof, So they get to the feed yard, they give them around a vaccine, put them on their implant program. Them guys, they're strapped for labor, and they just can't deal with those high-risk cattle. So that's my job to take a lot of that out of there. Now, to be more specific about it, each group of calves that comes in is different. So people ask me, what's your protocol? Well, the wishy-washy answer is it depends. The first thing I have to do is figure out what those calves need. I've bought in cattle from pretty much all over the southeast part of the country, and I can tell you cattle out of South Carolina are different than cattle from Louisiana, and they are different from cattle from Nebraska. So it kind of comes down to what do they need, and it's my job to figure that out and then provide that to them.
In some ways, you've touched on some mistakes people may make just based on talking about your own preferences, but do you want to highlight that a little more, whether it's, people you've seen go through your school or your own experiences? What are some of those mistakes people can make when they buy stockers that it's going to impact their profit negatively?
So on the buying end, you got to buy something that you can handle. Let's talk about the geographical spread. So if you live where I live, let's just stick with that since that's what I'm most familiar with, southeast Nebraska, and that's all you've done is bought cattle from southeast Nebraska, then you go buy a load out of Alabama, you're about to get a PhD in animal health. Those cattle are different. They got to be handled different, started different. So you have to have cattle you can handle. Sometimes these ball and three weights are a really good buy. Do you have the facilities to fence in a ball and three weight? Years ago, I was buying feeder bulls, and at the time I didn't have a squeeze chute. I just had a self-catching head catch. So I had to get in the alleyway behind the bull to cut him. And one of them kicked and took a chunk out of the side of my face, So kind of factoring some of those things in, that being able to identify certain cattle, like I mentioned the restarts earlier, some of these things come with experience. And we're seeing a lot of short wean cattle come into town where I live, and these are cattle that are weaned 3 weeks or less, and I won't buy them. And a lot of people ask me, well, how did you know they're short weaned? If you've weaned thousands of them, you know how those cattle change during the weaning process, and they have a tell. And the ticket might say, oh, they're weaned. Yeah, they're weaned long enough to quit balling, and that's it. People lie, but cattle are honest. And it kind of comes down to having that stockman's eye. And I wish I could explain it. And maybe someday I'll be able to put that in words, but some of that comes with putting your own money on the line and learning the lesson the hard way.
So you've brought up the short weaned calves or restart cattle a couple times. And previously in a podcast, I had a guest say, either they want them balling or they want them weaned at least 45, preferably 60 days. Would you say that's where you fall as well?
Oh, absolutely. With all these short weaned cattle coming to town, me and some of the other buyers had this conversation as I was grumbling about it. And to sum up that conversation, we all agreed they'd be better off to bring them fresh off the cow.
And that's just from the animal health standpoint and giving you a better chance to get those calves on the right track.
If they're fresh, I know what I got. Let me put this into context. Here's the thing with short wean cattle. You weaned them at home, and that's stress. There was a diet change when you weaned them. That's stress. You bring them to town to a sale barn, hey, a lot of stress there. Then they get commingled. They get put on a truck, more stress. They get to my place. There's another diet change. That is a lot that happened in a very short period of time, and as a stocker guy, I have a much better chance if those cattle are fresh.
Doug, what are we missing in this conversation that I haven't asked you already?
I would say you have to know how to market these animals, and you got to know the market that you're selling into. So being in southeast Nebraska, I'm not far from the Missouri River. You got Iowa just on the other side. Them Iowa guys, they love fat cattle. So if I get a group of cattle and I've been pushing a little extra corn and a little extra silage to them and they get fleshy, if I sell those in western Nebraska, I'm going to take a discount. But if I keep them over here by the East River, them Iowa guys are going to love them. So imagine those cattle coming off grass. They're green. They've got some compensatory gain in them. Them things will absolutely sell very well in western Nebraska. So understanding the market that you're selling into, knowing how to calculate, and again, this is going to be a sell-by thing, but knowing how to calculate a return on the gain, build a barn card so you know exactly how much to spend on your replacement animals and still hit your profit target, I think is key. One of the questions I'm getting a lot right now, these prices are high. We know what's coming. There's going to be a crash. What are you going to do then? Calculate return on the gains just like you do any other time. And, when that market crashes, you just ratchet down. You just keep trading. These stocker cattle do not all go up or down at the same rate. Flyweights could be up 20. Your 8 and 9 weights could only be up 3. And when the market's crashing, it could be the exact opposite. So those relationships will widen or narrow. And being able to interpret that, take advantage of them, is a key thing. The other thing to keep in mind about market crashes is when it's crashing, everybody else is freaking out and they don't want to do anything. So they sit on their hands. Makes it a lot easier to buy cattle when I don't have to bid against some other guys.
All right. That was a lot.
I've got that question quite a bit lately.
I think you even touched on that the last time you were on the show, and that was probably a year and a half, maybe 2 years ago. It's been a while since you've been back on.
If memory serves me correctly, I think I referred to bred heifers as dead equity. I can't remember if that was on your podcast, another one that I recorded at the same time. But I'll tell you today, bred heifers are not dead equity. They're a hot ticket. I watched a Missouri sale this last weekend online, and those bred heifers they're back at the top. They're the highest selling female right now. So there's another option with stockers. If you got stocker heifers, you can breed them.
Right away you talked about the different avenues you can take to profit off of stockers. And now we're kind of towards the end of our conversation, and you just brought up another avenue that if you have heifers, you could breed them. Are there other avenues that come to mind that we didn't touch on?
There's a running list that I have in my marketing school, and I can't remember, there's probably 20-some points on there of different ways to add monetary gain, to cattle, PI testing and selling them verified PI free. There were some guys at that sale in Missouri, they bought heifers, they banged them, so now they're OCV'd and everything, and they got a hell of a premium on those heifers. They were 7-8 weight heifers bringing $3,200. $4 a pound for those girls. I mean, there's so many different things you can do. Understanding how to sell these cattle, you got to make sure that they show well. You cannot take some of these southeast type cattle and sell them in western Nebraska. They're not going to show well there. Keeping some of those things in mind. Of course, load lots, always sell better. Sort them so they look like a tabletop. You want them all the same height when they come through that ring. And if there's anything in there, if one's a little heavier, muscled, thicker made, let the buyers pull them off. There's just a lot that I could go on and on about.
A question kind of came to me as you were talking there, because we talked about how you buy a lot of cattle through the barn. Do you sell most of your cattle through the barn too? Or do you do private transactions there?
So I do both. The nice thing about a private treaty sale is, I'll do it over text, and, it'll say something like, hey, here's the head count. So it might be 1 or 2 loads, all black, base weight, slide. Here's the shrink I'm offering. And a lot of those guys have their own trucks. So we'll weigh them on the truck. And the thing about that is you always want your place as the point of sale, just so that way if there's a dispute, you have home field advantage. The other nice thing about a text is you can screenshot them. That way you know who agreed to what. And, a buyer will either just ignore your text or say, yeah, when do you want to load them? And then you just set a date. So you have a lot of control over those things. You don't have the commission. Like I said, you're kind of controlling the shrink with the pencil shrink there. But I do a lot through sale barns. I'm watching sale barns daily. Market reports, we all got DV Auction, Cattle USA, those kinds of deals. So I can watch them and see what the hot ticket is. And it's like, let's just say, for example, 7-weight heifers are a hot ticket. Oh, I happen to have a load of 7-weight heifers. Well, I just better get some wheels under them right now, get them sold. And, of course, I've already got the replacement identified. I know I can pull that trade off before I even get them consigned.
Doug, is there anything else you want to add for the listeners today before we wrap up?
We have been getting a lot of requests for schools in 2026. And right now, the only one that we have confirmed will be February 10th and 11th, and that'll be in Lincoln, Nebraska this time. So it'll be right off I-80.
Well, for those of you listening, I will be sure to put some information for Doug's schools in the podcast notes. If you appreciated this conversation, remember to leave a rating, a review, and most importantly, share it with a friend who is going to find this information valuable, because podcasts grow best by word of mouth. But with that, thank you, Doug, for joining us today. And for all of you out there listening, happy ranching, or maybe happy running stalkers.
RanchChannel.com. I'll give you just a few seconds to head there on your phone. RanchChannel.com, your farm and ranch network on demand. Bull sales, western events, product information, right at your fingertips on the ultimate cowboy-friendly platform. Want to follow up-to-date markets? RanchChannel.com. No need to dig for information on all these different websites. It's all right there on RanchChannel.com. Y'all are loving it now, aren't you?